Dear friends, welcome back to another episode of The Informant. In today's video, we're diving into a deeply sensitive and critical topic, the conflict on the Korean Peninsula and its global implications. The stakes are incredibly high here. Any clash in this region could draw in the world's largest nuclear powers. It's essential to understand how we've arrived at this precarious point. We'll take a deep dive into the historical and global context of the situation. But before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Tensions on the Korean Peninsula remain high. On October 24th, North Korea launched balloons toward South Korea for the 30th time since May, with this launch carrying propaganda leaflets instead of the usual trash. The leaflets criticized South Korea's government, highlighted issues like suicide rates and low minimum wages, and urged citizens to consider emigration. This is the first time in several years that North Korea has used propaganda leaflets, having primarily sent trash-filled balloons since May, as a counter to South Korean activist activities. 2 weeks prior, North Korean officials reported that South Korean drones had flown over Pyongyang, scattering propaganda materials, which led North Korea to place its border artillery on combat alert. North Korea likely views the leaflets as a response to what it sees as South Korea's escalating psychological tactics in an ongoing propaganda war. North Korea, under the leadership of Kim Jong-un, is often portrayed as a cartoonish villain, but experts warn that after the failure of peace talks between the Koreas, the country might be preparing for something far more serious: war. The signs are ominous, with North Korean soldiers sabotaging train lines, bombing roads, and setting up barriers to cut communication with the South. On the other side, South Korea has been reinforcing its partnership with the United States, showing off its military prowess, like the sighting of an American supersonic bomber flying over during a military parade. A conflict in the Korean Peninsula would likely pull in the world's nuclear powers. When dictators get fixated on maps and borders, it's always a red flag. Kim Jong-un, for instance, recently posed with a model of South Korea's capital and warned that his country is ready to annihilate the South completely, if provoked. One of his key areas of focus is the maritime border, known as the Northern Limit Line, which separates the two Koreas. While the islands in the region are controlled by the South, North Korea claims the surrounding waters, keeping the area in constant tension, exacerbated by joint military exercises between the US and South Korea. In 2010, North Korea launched an attack on one of these islands, killing several people. Recently, North Korean forces have been conducting artillery strikes in the waters near these islands. North Korea has never officially recognized this border, and Kim recently called it illegal, sparking fears that he might be planning a broader military move. According to former U.S. intelligence officer Robert Carlin, Kim's statements on illegal borders could be just the first step toward outright military conflict. He also recently declared South Korea to be the North's primary enemy, signaling a shift from the previous goal of peaceful reunification. Let's not forget that Kim commands one of the largest standing armies in the world, complete with nuclear weapons. Tensions are boiling both at sea and on the land border, where the most militarized demilitarized zone, DMZ, in the world stands. The Korean War may have been frozen for the past 70 years, but how did we get here? After World War II, Korea was liberated from Japan and divided between the Soviet Union and the US. In 1950, North Korea invaded the South, sparking a brutal war that claimed more than 2.5 million lives. Supported by the Soviets and China, the North faced off against the US-led UN forces supporting the South. In 1953, an armistice was signed, creating the DMZ, but issues like the maritime border remained unresolved. The Kim family, who started the war, has remained in power ever since. North Korea is the world's only communist dynasty. It's a totalitarian regime, with a massive personality cult and one of the worst human rights records globally. Isolated from the rest of the world, North Korea still conducts trade with a few neighbors, primarily China, with which it shares a long border. The region of Rason, located at the border with China and Russia, is a special economic zone where North Korea allows a small degree of capitalism. Recent satellite images show an unusual increase in rail activity at the Pyongyang station, hinting that North Korea may be supplying ammunition to Russia as it continues its war in Ukraine. The US, Ukraine, and South Korea have all claimed that North Korea has sent around 12,000 troops to Russia for training, with the intention of deploying them to the front lines in Ukraine, a sign that the conflict is escalating. In return, Kim Jong-un is reportedly receiving oil, raw materials, and components for weapons manufacturing, including missile technology. Kim has doubled down on his alliance with Putin, and so far it seems to be paying off with lavish gifts like a Russian limousine in tow. Despite the international sanctions on both nations, their partnership has only grown stronger. North Korea is gaining valuable field experience with its missiles, some of which have reportedly been used in the Ukrainian conflict. This may improve the quality of its arsenal, making its weapons more appealing to buyers like Syria and Iran. Recently, North Korea also launched its first spy satellite into orbit, allegedly with Russian assistance, marking a new level of military cooperation between the two countries, something unseen since the Cold War. This could potentially elevate North Korea's nuclear capabilities, though there's no direct evidence yet that Russia is aiding them in this area. Since 2022, North Korea has dramatically increased its missile tests, which some see as provocations. However, experts argue that the regime is testing new, mostly functional systems. In the past, these tests were a way to draw US attention for diplomatic talks. But after the collapse of the Kim-Trump summit in Hanoi, North Korea's approach has shifted. Kim no longer seems to believe that sanctions can be lifted through peaceful negotiations. The current landscape points to rising tensions between North Korea, China, Russia, and their allies, with Kim aligning himself firmly against the West. His rhetoric about the maritime border might be just talk, but it could also hint at long-term plans. Is Kim merely testing the waters, or is he preparing for something much bigger? The disputed maritime border between the Koreas is a strategic hotspot, and North Korea could be planning to seize one of the islands controlled by the South. Such a move could trigger a larger military conflict as Kim strengthens his alliances and builds his arsenal. North Korea's military investments, its trained troops, and acquired equipment all suggest that the regime may be gearing up for a confrontation. Support from countries like Russia and China could be giving Kim the confidence to challenge the status quo. But where does Kim see himself in all of this? What is his ultimate goal? And more importantly, how close is he to taking decisive action that could spark a large-scale conflict? These are questions that keep the international community on edge. This isn't just saber-rattling. There's a very real danger here. The tensions on the Korean Peninsula have far-reaching global implications, with nuclear weapons and conflicting interests all converging in this hotspot. Given the gravity of the situation, many analysts believe that diplomacy is still the best course of action. Re-engaging North Korea on the world stage and pursuing agreements to reduce tensions should remain a priority. However, Kim's recent actions suggest that he is moving further away from such possibilities, instead doubling down on military power and strengthening his ties with nations that share his worldview. The division of Korea, a lingering wound from the Cold War, has never fully healed. Now, with diplomacy faltering and the alignment of authoritarian regimes like North Korea, Russia, and China, the region has once again become a global flashpoint. What happens next is anyone's guess, but the world will be watching closely as Kim Jong-un and his allies make their next moves. The fate of the Korean Peninsula, and perhaps other regions caught up in these power struggles, hangs in the balance. Stay tuned as we continue to monitor this situation closely, as the future of peace in Asia and beyond may depend on it. If you value independent journalism and want to support our work, consider buying us a coffee using the QR code on your screen. Your contributions are vital to help us keep delivering in-depth analysis and high-quality insights. Stay tuned for more updates, and don't forget to subscribe to The Informant for the latest news on the world's most urgent geopolitical issues.